they're very loose. So when I come to create a picture, I mean, I don't do roughs. I mean, this is part of the problem of what I do is that if you're doing a book cover, they want a rough. And they want to know what it looks like. And if I do a rough, I know what it looks like, and I don't need to do the picture anymore. So it's creating a picture is an exploration for me. It's an adventure. So I start off literally with a blank bit of card, and I use a lot of geometry underneath. Although on the surface they're very tangled, underneath there's good strong geometric forms in which I lay the various characters. So it's just something starts it off. There's something will seem to be the germ of an idea, or the beginning thing of the picture, which I'll lay in, and then I'll sort of flick through the sketchbooks, and suddenly things start to leap out and seem that they sort of related to this idea. And then I'll start putting the sketchbook material into the picture, and it's at that point that the loose sketches become finalized. It's like proportions change because they are in relationship to a complex geometry underneath, and then they're also in relationship to each other in terms of making the picture work as a whole. So it's only in the painting do these fairy forms become finished and fixed. So you know, up to then everything's sort of fluid.
Go on, hello, yell it at me.
You have a piece of artwork, just look at it.
Sure.
Oh, cut to the chase, why don't
Yes.
you? Spend who's the build-off.
What do you think? Having all these ways to describe pictures, seeing the pictures are so
True. Do you want to use the camera? Dave, you finished fiddling?
No.
Shall I tilt the lens?
Just tilt it down slightly.
Down slightly.
Oh, this is that. Oh.
This is an idea for a series of books that's been a long time getting off the ground because of publishers not wanting to do it. And I've created 4 book covers and various drawings that go on the inside, and they are novels, and it's called Brian Froud's Fairylands, and from these various authors are writing the whole book around what I've done. It's just a jumping off point for them. So this is what I was sort of trying to explain before, is that I reverse the process, is that I don't illustrate people's words anymore, the writers illustrate my pictures in a way. So which I've been doing for years, because that's what happened on Dark Crystal and Labyrinth, that I created all of the images and ideas, and the scripts were written around that.
How did they, going on to the films perhaps then, how did they come about? Were you approached, we had a real idea, we've seen the work, we want to make a film using it? Or did they say, here's a script, we want asphyxies, we want a
yeah, Jim Henson and his daughter were snowed in. They were catching an aeroplane somewhere, I'm not sure where they were, and they got snowed in for a couple of days. And they were bored and didn't know what to do, and they just started to invent an idea. Jim remembers seeing a children's book that was about crocodiles that lived in a castle. So that was the germ of the idea that became Dark Crystal, with some reptilian creatures that lived in opulence. So somebody had given him one of my books, so he thought I would be the person to design. So they contacted me, and I went to New York, and we sat down with a group of about 8 or 9 people who were various puppet makers, and I met my future wife then. She was a doll maker in special just sat around in a group and just pushed the ideas around about what creatures might. We just sort of invented a whole world and what these creatures might be like and what they might do, and I just kept doodling and creating pictures, and then we started to make prototype puppets. So and then a lot of my design work was physical rather than just drawings, because of technical reasons of making these puppets and real, and making you believe they can do anything. So as that was sort of pushing, we were sort of developing the story.
So how close was the finished sort of designs to the early sketches? Were they really different, or did you more or less get the idea and they just...
It did change a lot. I mean, that was the reason I worked on it for 5 years, day and night, because we knew right from the beginning it was no good me just doing a drawing and walking away and it was going to be fine. Just part of my job was to not make it look just like that, but just keep the spirit of it going, because we knew that there were lots of technical problems that we had to overcome. So a lot of my designing was to hide the technical problems.
The sacred geometry kind of idea behind it, was that from you?
Yes. Well, I think it was part of, I became more interested in that. I mean, it was creating a whole world was the challenge for Dark Crystal. So I used a lot of that geometry to underpin it, so it actually had sort of... It was like if you scratched the surface of any one part of that world, I didn't want it to reveal as being a sham, that it actually held together as a complete entity. So that was what I was trying to do by implying this sort of structure somehow with the geometry. And it was a struggle with the book, I have to say, but when it was all right sneaking in some of that into the film, but when they always ask you daft things like, can you do the storybook? And you say, well, what are you talking about? Because the film's the story. So I'm always interested in the book being something different or new or something I haven't quite seen before. So I fought and fought to keep those overlays in the book. And of course the thing they wanted to get rid of, because they didn't understand it, and also it was expensive, and that was the first thing they wanted to get rid of, and I said that's essential,
That was the essential
to keep that in. Yeah.
Was it in your experience, 5 years on one project? In the end, did you think, oh God, I wish this film was finished, or was it always sort of labour of love?
It was a labour of love. I think we were all astonishingly naive, really. I mean, we all came from other disciplines. I think that's the thing that gave it its strength, that we weren't all enamoured of movie making. We all came from elsewhere, and we just sort of somehow believed in it as, this sort of underlying message somehow.
In his obituary, they said that Jim Henson felt that was his best piece of work.
Yes, I think the problem was that he was disappointed that it wasn't as successful as he wished it to be. He was the one that really wanted to go to Hollywood and be part of that, and we weren't particularly. But so I think he was very disappointed. And unfortunately, because of that, I think when we did Labyrinth, which is the next one, we made too many compromises, whereas Dark Crystal is a much purer film. Yes.
Well, mentioning Labyrinth then, I suppose critically a bigger success, while maybe not necessarily a better film. And just in case anybody hasn't been with it, the reason we've got Toby, Brian's son, on stage is he's grown up a bit since last you saw him. Toby was the baby in Labyrinth. So obviously, I was not quite saying what was it like filming, because you were kind of concerned with things, but what's it like, growing up in a world where you're surrounded by goblins and that? Because I understand you've got a lot of strange objects around the house.
Well, not in yet.
I think you're used to it, aren't you? Yeah. We were asked that when he was because in the film, unfortunately, he cries a lot, and it's actually quite hard for me to look at the film now, because you hear him crying, and all you want to do is sort of pick him up, and you remember that as a baby. And we were asked a lot whether he was frightened of all these monsters, but he wasn't, because he was so used to them all the time. So the reason he was crying is that every time you put him in the bed, the cot, which was the middle of the afternoon, the filming, he thought that we were trying to make him to go to bed, and he didn't want to go to bed, so he was just complaining. So.
So I'm just thinking, CV cries a lot. It's. I mean, do you want to do another? Would you like to do another film? What would you like to be next time in a film? Another fantasy one, or do you want it to be sort of, Arnold Schwarzenegger's new Archie villain?
I wouldn't mind really.
Okay, right. Okay, so you've met him now. Years to come, big movie star. Okay.
Well, one thing about Toby is that I created lots of conceptual design pictures, which, one of the things that was the leaping off point for Labyrinth was that I think Jim Henson was rather disappointed with the Gelflings, which was in a way, his fault, because he was going to puppeteer Jen, the boy, but he never rehearsed. He never got round to it. So he then discovered that it was actually very hard to do and bring to life, and also because they're closer to a human being in the whole look of the film, it's actually harder to make them seem real. So because of that, this is our compromise, was that we thought then we would put in human beings amongst puppets. So my initial idea was to do goblins with the baby. It's a classic story of the baby being stolen by goblins. So I created a picture which had this baby surrounded by goblins. So by the time we developed the script and made the puppets, we came to filming. Toby had been born and was exactly the same age as the baby we wanted, and also he actually looked like my drawings, was an extraordinary thing. So I've been obviously designing on an inner level, really. So.
Have you enjoyed the Hollywood experience from that set on to new things, or would you like to do another one?
I think almost never again. I don't think we'd be lucky enough to do to be able to do it. And Jim Henson was a wonderful man to work for, because he was so open to ideas, and also would bring in lots of, let's say, different disciplines, which I think would give the movies a richness and a denseness to it. But it's not normally, and also that time, there was 5 years on Dark Crystal and 4 years on Labyrinth.
Do you believe the said one?
That's the one, yes.
Have people seen this book before?
Yeah.
Well, we'll pass it around. The painting you're referring to, correct me on that is Toby a year before he's born.
That's right, yeah.
Right. Ali? Oh, no. Well, there's Toby. We won't pass him round. Oh, it's not busy. It's coming round. What about in sort of other life? We've done any sort of thought about stage.
No, we were developing an idea at one time with Jim, doing a stage play, a medieval one, but in the end I did some designs, but that never came to anything. I've also created some designs for an animated film that was a disaster. It was Little Nemo.
Oh.
And I designed Nightmare Land for that, but they sort of cut most of my stuff out.
Any questions from the audience? Were you stunned by his... Yeah. I'm not sure it's stunned or what I'm going to say. I'm a woman snapping with pencils as usual. I hate interviewing artists. They always make me think, why on earth would I bother? Oh, more.
Well, there's a silence, this was.
Okay, yeah, let's the camera set up. Can I sort of slide him
trying to work on another book we've been working on for several years on fairies, and haven't got a definite publisher at the moment, but things are getting closer.
In connection with the fairies that you did before, is it?
I want to do the follow-up, whereas that fairies book was a nostalgic look backwards. Fairies, really. I want to do about fairies now and the future.
Right.
So they're almost more psychological than fairies that cause problems.
I'll do an interview from down here. It's much more fun. How do you do? Let's get in. World's first roving reporter. You know, it's. How long does one of these pictures take to execute?
Well, they vary. I mean, it's a single figure.
Maybe not.
Single figure one. I mean, I actually can do quite quickly in a couple of days, but I find that these larger ones, the complicated ones, can take me anything up to a month.
What medium are you using this?
I used to work in watercolour and gouache with a colour pencil, and then a couple of years ago I had a terrible moment when I just completely lost it. I couldn't do it anymore, and I now work in acrylics and colour pencil, and it was awful for a while. But I think what was going on was that before I knew what I wanted and I could go straight for it, and now I'm searching for something else, and I keep pushing my boundaries out a bit. So I'm struggling more, and my colours are changing, getting brighter. So I find with acrylics I can put washes on and creep up on what I want, rather than sort of.
I should stop it, I think. No, it hasn't stopped. It's turned something off. Let's go. Oh, right. Was that spurred you people on at all? Or are you still stunned? All right, more questions from me.
Are these the ones the books are about?
Yes, the fairies book. I mean, the thing is, I've been struggling towards text because what I really want is for people to have a relationship with pictures. Is that I mean, I'm sort of fascinated, I think, with the relationship between an image and the word. I mean, that's why I keep sort of trying to change the rules all the time. But with these, I feel that if you put a title underneath, it sort of pins it down, and which I don't want. I want it to be open, and I want each person that sees it to have their own idea what it is and what it means. So, I mean, I want people to sort of say, "Oh, I recognise that. I know who that is. I know what that is." Right. But so I'm finding the way of doing that in the book is being a problem at the moment. I want to keep text open.
So, you were saying earlier that a face is two dots and a squiggle. Is that? I mean, could you take us through these?
This is a typical example of that. That's precisely what that was. You see, if you look at fantasy art, I think most of it, to me, I mean, I just don't like. It's because it's over-rendered and over-finished and shiny and glossy, and your eye sort of skids off it. Not only does your eye skid off it, but your emotions do, I feel. So I'm looking for a way of creating something that allows you in. So it's still not quite finished, you see. So there's something about, these eyes that I try to keep as abstract as possible, that it is just oddly two little splodges. And that way, when you look at it, you personally add some of the details yourself. And as you do that, it becomes much more of an intimate act in viewing the picture. Now, I've discovered with this one in particular that some people have a bad reaction to it and say, "Ooh, don't like that," and other people say it's marvellous. And it took me ages to figure out what was going on when I was trying to find out who these creatures are, and this one turned out to be about honesty. And what it does, it always tells the truth, and it reflects back to you almost your own feelings or your own soul. You know, so, and it's the chap you need when you're buying, you know, that dress or whatever, because it's going to tell you what you look like. You know, really, or that tie. You know, so you shouldn't really be wearing that tie. You know.
So, do you draw on sort of folklore, legend for your work, or do you base on and then sort of mould it to your own style?
Yes, and it's difficult to explain. I try to be. What I have to do is to make people believe this. I mean, it's a strange path to embark upon, is to paint pictures of fairies, because you get an instant reaction, you know, because it's usually dismissed. So you've got to show people what it's really like. I mean, what real fairies are like. You've got to sort of overcome the prejudice. So part of what I do, especially in, say, one of the complex ones, is to put something that's very real in. I'll put a figure that's a human figure, for instance, that's, you know, photographic. And that's the touchstone, because, see, if I just painted pictures of fairies, it could be easily dismissed and said, oh, it's just his style, it's just the way, you know. It's not my style. These are, as far as I can do, accurate representations of, you know, psychic creatures. So by creating that touchstone, something that's real, everything I do then, everything I push, change the proportions, push them into the stranger areas, people then follow you and believe it and accept the whole world. What was the question?
Not as good as questions to answer. I mean,
so,
I mean, you're saying, you know, you're plotting, I suppose to tell, a fairies too, I suppose, the next generation. I don't know.
Yes.
Modern day fairies. How do you mean by? Are you sort of updating or
Have
just
they
saying-
changed? Have the, in your eyes, have fairies now changed at all? Or are they
well, not really. I mean, I think we just, like, fairies was, we did base it on a lot of folklore and past sightings, and I'm just trying to say that fairies are around us now. I mean, it's just a way of, it's this thing about, I think, this whole genre of fantasy that it's often perceived as a retreat from something. It's an escapist form. And I say it's not. It's actually a way of re-engaging with the world. It's actually a way of reapproaching everything. You know, because it actually gives you psychic tools to deal with reality. I mean, all fantasy writing is about that. But it's not perceived as such, unfortunately, by the mainstream. It's always sort of pushed onto the periphery. But I think, sort of, you know, oddly enough, I think, you know, fantasy writing and books and pictures probably have more to say, if they're good, you know, about the world than any of this, you know, the major art forms really at the moment.
Were you pleased with the transfer of your pictures into the puppets?
Yes, because because if I wasn't pleased, it was only my own fault, because of literally working every day on it. You know, I had to. I mean, they looked exactly the way I wanted them to. I have to say, sometimes emotionally, I wasn't so sure about some of them. But that's part of the pain and the pleasure. I mean, part of the pleasure is working with a whole group of creative people, and everything being more than the sum total of actually ending up somewhere, you know, much more exciting than you could have done on your own. So it was everybody's input that made these creatures, you know, wonderful. But oddly enough, part of that also is the pain because you've lost some of it. Not that I had a particularly clear view of what some of the creatures should be, but I mean, again, because I like to keep it open.
Do you use models at all?
Yes, I mean, I take photographs. I mean, lots of, yes, I take, I mean, there are the doodles in sketchbooks, that's, you know, ideas. Plus I use,
I was thinking of,
yes,
the
photographs.
faces, they're too real to
well, I'll often use my own photographic reference and push it and distort it, and the creature in the end you may never know that's what it's based on. But I find it's again that searching to making it real. If I base it on something that is real, it seems
to a certain extent the imperfections of the real image make the whole image real, because you know if an artist can draw the perfect woman and it doesn't look right because it doesn't look real. So although I know, I mean, a lot of artists do use, and often they have volumes of reference photographs of people and animals and things.
I do.
It's
yeah, I do that. It's because and I often use the same photograph in different ways. I mean, it depends which way I want to push it.
Do you take your things from creatures more than people? You know, there's a lot of.
Well, I'm always interested. I mean, I think that's why I'm interested in the fairy world, because it's in between. It's neither one thing or the other. It's always things are just moving from one state into the other. So the thing that really interests me is to create a creature that people say, I mean, look at and think they know. You know, say, oh, I know how there's, and then look at it and think, no, I've never seen that before. And it's usually some mixture, an amalgam of, you know, two creatures put together. Like yes, right. Yeah. I mean, it's like the Skeksis were part bird and part reptile and part, you know, something else.
Yeah,
it's always
put me in mind of vultures. I don't know why. And you see a vulture sort of on the ground, and it's very clanky and awkward, and it looks like it should be more impressive than it really is. And to some extent, I've got the idea with the Skeksis that, you know, these sinister creatures that want that really bad. They were much more sort of bluster than real.
Well, they've gone too far. I mean, the interesting thing is that that's what we were trying to say, is that there isn't such a thing as just pure evil and pure good. I mean, they were a strange amalgam and all that. And the interesting thing about Dark Crystal is that it was used in seminaries, you know, for teaching there, and used for healing weekends. It's sort of a bit ahead of its time, really, about all that.
It's something different. The other one I noticed is, even when you get your, how should I describe the characters? The fairies are very light and airy, but you tend to hide your more, not sinister, your more deviant, I suppose, maybe characters. They never really look bad or evil. They just look, you know, not necessarily good. Is that accident or design?
Design. I mean, it's interesting. I was commissioned once for some people who came from Hawaii to do a fairy picture, which I did, and they said no nudity, and I said, well, fair enough. So I did this picture, and in the background I had one of my little troll faces, and I made a mistake of sending them a photograph first, and they said, oh, we can't have this because the figure in the background is evil. And I was really angry, and I said, well, you know, I actually have never created anything evil. I mean, I deliberately don't do that, you know. And it was strange. It was because one eye was sort of open, the other eye was closed. And as soon as I opened both the eyes up and made them exactly the same, they were all right about it. But so it's worrying about what they were perceiving. I mean, why they thought this was evil, I have no idea. But I do try to make the darker characters, you know, have a twinkle in their eye. so you can, so they are fun. I mean, it's interesting. I might be doing some book covers at the moment. It's sort of early stage for Clive Barker, and I've just been doing the roughs now, and it's sort of a bit horrifying for me having now to push it into areas that are a bit strange for me.
What I'd like, I was going to suggest for the moment, if we take a short break from talking like this, if you want to come forward and have a good, don't dribble on, please, have a closer look. We'd like a drink. I'll go get you a drink.
Sure.
Wait, lager.
Please.
Pint of lager. Toby?
No.
You're a lager, do you? Lemonade. Right. Okay. Well, if we I'm going to take a short break from the interview. If you people want to go and have a look, so please do. And I'll forget to turn this damn camera off.